This is the story of a nation's awakening. For centuries, the German lands lay divided, a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, bishoprics, and free cities. To outsiders, it was a labyrinth of borders and banners, a land rich in culture but fractured in power. Yet within this fragmented world burned an idea that one day, Germans would rise above division, speak with one voice, and take their place as a united nation in the heart of Europe. At the dawn of the 19th century, that dream seemed distant, even impossible. The Holy Roman Empire, once called the First Reich, had endured for nearly 1,000 years, but by the 1700s, it was little more than a hollow shell. Its emperors, chosen from the Austrian Habsburgs, commanded respect in name, but little control in practice. Local rulers jealously guarded their autonomy. Germany was not one nation, but hundreds of tiny sovereignties, each clinging to its own traditions, armies, and laws. Then came the storm, the French Revolution and Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1806, after a crushing defeat in Napoleon's hands, the Holy Roman Empire was dissolved. What had stood for nearly a millennium disappeared overnight. In its place, Napoleon created the Confederation of Rhine, a collection of German states under French influence. For many Germans, it was humiliation, their ancient empire dismantled by a foreign conqueror. Yet for others, it was a revelation. Napoleon's reforms, the abolition of feudal privileges, the introduction of modern administration, and the spread of the Napoleonic Code, planted seeds of change that could not be easily erased. By 1813, the tide turned. At Leipzig, in the Battle of Nations, a coalition of European powers, including Prussia and Austria, defeated Napoleon's forces. 2 years later, the Congress of Vienna, 1815, sought to rebuild the European order. But for Germany, Vienna meant compromise, not unity. The German Confederation was established, a loose association of 39 states. Austria and Prussia dominated, ensuring no single power could control the heart of Europe. For conservatives, this balance promised stability. But for nationalists, it was a prison of division, where the dream of unity remained alive but unfulfilled. The stage was set. Out of the ruins of empire, amid the clash of old traditions and new ideas, the long struggle for German unification had begun. The German Confederation created at Vienna was not a nation, but a compromise, a fragile balance designed to prevent either Austria or Prussia from dominating. Yet beneath the surface, forces were stirring that would not be contained. Across Europe, the 19th century was an age of nationalism, and nowhere was this idea more potent than in the German lands. Writers, poets, and philosophers began to imagine Germany not as a cluster of duchies, but as a cultural homeland united by language and history. The Brothers Grimm collected folk tales to preserve a shared heritage. Students gathered in nationalist fraternities, calling for unity and freedom. At the Wartburg Festival of 1817, young Germans rallied under banners of black, red, and gold, colors that would one day symbolize the nation. Their voices were silenced by censorship, but the idea of unity burned hotter with each generation. Economics, too, pushed the Germans together. In 1834, Prussia created the Zollverein, a customs union that abolished tariffs between member states. For the first time, goods flowed freely across much of Germany, knitting the economies together. Austria, fearful of Prussia's rising power, remained outside. What politics could not yet achieve, commerce began to build. A sense that the German people shared more than borders. They shared a destiny. Then came a year 1848, a year of revolution across Europe. In Paris, Vienna, and Berlin, crowds demanded liberty, constitutions, and national unity. In the German lands, revolutionaries seized the moment. The Frankfurt Assembly, the first freely elected parliament in Germany, met to draft a constitution for a united nation. Delegates debated monarchy versus republic, federalism versus centralization, the rights of citizens and the limits of power. For a brief, shining moment, the dream seemed within reach. But dreams can falter on the rocks of reality. The Frankfurt Parliament offered the crown of a united Germany to King Frederick William IV of Prussia. He refused, declaring he would not accept the crown from the gutter. Without Prussian support, the revolution collapsed. Soldiers crushed uprisings, exiles fled abroad, and the dream of unity was buried, but not forgotten. The revolution of 1848 failed, but it revealed two truths. First, that liberal nationalism, based on democracy and constitutions, was too weak to overcome the entrenched powers of kings and princes. Second, that only Prussia, with its army and growing might, could one day achieve unification. From the ashes of 1848, a new path would emerge, not through speeches and parliaments, but through strategy, war, and the iron will of leaders. The stage was now set for Otto von Bismarck and his policy of realpolitik. The failed revolution of 1848 left Germany divided once again, but it also left behind a new understanding. If unification were to come, it would not be through idealistic parliaments or peaceful assemblies. It would be forged in the crucible of power through statesmanship, diplomacy, and force. And in the heart of this story stood one man, Otto von Bismarck. Prussia, by the mid-19th century, had risen as the strongest of the German states. Its disciplined army, growing industry, and leadership of its Zollverein customs union gave it a commanding position. Austria, once the unquestioned leader of German affairs, found itself increasingly outmatched. It still held prestige, but its diverse empire, filled with Hungarians, Czechs, Italians, and others, strained under nationalist pressures. Prussia, more homogeneous and modernizing rapidly, looked better suited to lead. Otto von Bismarck, appointed Prime Minister of Prussia in 1862, understood this reality better than anyone. Known as the Iron Chancellor, he was no dreamer of liberal constitutions. He believed in realpolitik, politics based not on ideals, but on practical power. In a famous speech to the Prussian parliament, he declared that the great questions of the age will not be decided by speeches and majority decisions, but by blood and iron. Bismarck's genius lay in his ability to manipulate events. He did not oppose nationalism outright. He harnessed it, bending it to Prussia's advantage. He strengthened the army, defied parliamentary opposition, and prepared Prussia for decisive conflicts. His strategy was simple yet bold. Isolate Austria, defeat its influence, and then rally the German states under Prussian leadership. To achieve this, he would engineer a series of wars that would change the map of Europe. The first step came in 1864 with the Danish War. Alongside Austria, Prussia fought to seize the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. The war was short, decisive, and victorious. But the real prize was not territory. It was the opportunity Bismarck created. By sharing victory with Austria, he ensured future tensions over administration of the duchies. He was setting the stage for confrontation. Bismarck knew that unification could not be achieved without breaking Austria's dominance. Yet he also knew Prussia could not face Austria and its allies without careful preparation. Over the next 2 years, he secured neutrality from France, made promises to Italy, and strengthened Prussia's army. Then, in 1866, the inevitable clash arrived, the Austro-Prussian War. In 1866, the long rivalry between Austria and Prussia erupted into war. On paper, Austria seemed the stronger power, a vast empire with allies in southern Germany. But Bismarck had prepared meticulously. He secured Italy's alliance, promising Venetia if Austria were defeated, and won assurances of neutrality from France and Russia. Prussia would fight with fewer enemies, on its own terms. The conflict, known as the Austro-Prussian War, lasted only 7 weeks. It was a demonstration of Prussian efficiency and modernization. Equipped with the breech-loading needle gun, Prussian infantry could fire more rapidly than their Austrian counterparts. Railways allowed swift troop movements. At Königgrätz, also called the Battle of Zadova, Prussia struck a decisive blow. Austria's armies collapsed, and the Habsburg dream of leading Germany was shattered. Bismarck, ever the strategist, chose not to humiliate Austria. He resisted calls to annex territory deep into the empire, arguing that Austria must remain a potential ally for the future. Instead, Austria was excluded from German affairs, its influence permanently broken. The German Confederation was dissolved, replaced in 1867 by the North German Confederation under Prussian leadership. For the first time, a unified German state, though incomplete, existed. With its own constitution, parliament, and army, it brought together 22 northern states under Prussia's king, Wilhelm I. The dream of unity was closer than ever, yet not fully realized. The southern states, Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, and Hesse-Darmstadt, remained outside, wary of Prussia's dominance. To complete the project, another war would be necessary. Bismarck knew it. He had united the North through careful diplomacy and a calculated war against Austria. Now, he would have to rally the South, not by persuasion, but by awakening a shared sense of nationalism in the face of a common enemy. That enemy would be France. By the late 1860s, Prussia had reshaped Germany's destiny. The North was unified under the North German Confederation, but the southern states still stood apart. They shared culture and language with their northern cousins, yet they hesitated, wary of Prussia's growing power. To bring them into the fold, Bismarck knew only one thing could succeed: war. But not just any war, a war that would ignite the flames of nationalism and sweep away division. The opportunity came in 1870. Spain had offered its vacant throne to a relative of the Prussian king, Leopold of Hohenzollern. France, under Emperor Napoleon III, felt threatened at the prospect of being surrounded by Hohenzollerns in both Berlin and Madrid. French diplomats demanded assurances from King Wilhelm I of Prussia. Wilhelm agreed politely to withdraw the candidacy, but Bismarck seized the moment. He released the EMS Dispatch, a carefully edited version of the king's conversation with the French ambassador, making it appear that both sides had insulted each other. Outrage exploded in Paris. National pride demanded action. On July 19, 1870, France declared war on Prussia. Just as Bismarck had hoped, the southern German states now rallied to Prussia's side. The war for unification had begun. Prussian efficiency once again proved decisive. Germany's armies, coordinated under Helmuth von Moltke, mobilized rapidly. The French, though proud of their reputation, were unprepared. At Sedan in September 1870, Napoleon III himself was captured with 100,000 soldiers. The Second French Empire collapsed overnight. Paris, defiant, declared a republic and continued the fight, but the outcome was inevitable. By January 1871, Paris was under siege, its people starving in desperation. While Paris starved, a ceremony unfolded that symbolized the birth of a new order. On January 18, 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, the very heart of French royal pride, the German princes gathered, surrounded by soldiers. King Wilhelm I of Prussia was proclaimed German Emperor, Kaiser of a new Reich. Cheers of Deutschland, Deutschland über alles rang out, echoing through the marble halls. The humiliation for France was profound. The triumph for Germany, absolute. The German Empire was born. For the first time in history, most of the German people were united under one state. Bismarck's vision, achieved through diplomacy, manipulation, and 3 short wars, had been realized. Germany stood as a new power in Europe, industrial, disciplined, and ambitious. But the manner of its birth, forged in war and crowned in the humiliation of France, would sow seeds of rivalry that would echo into the 20th century. The proclamation of the German Empire in 1871 marked not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new chapter. Germany was united, but unity brought its own challenges. How could dozens of former kingdoms, duchies, and principalities be molded into one functioning nation? How could a newly forged empire find its place in the shifting balance of European power? The German Empire was federal in nature. Prussia dominated, its king, now the Kaiser, Wilhelm I, and its chancellor, Otto von Bismarck, the true architect of the new order. But the southern states retained privileges. Bavaria kept its own army in peacetime, and local rulers maintained their titles. The Reichstag, a parliament elected by universal male suffrage, gave the people a voice, but power remained concentrated in the Kaiser and his ministers. Germany was a blend of modern democracy and old-world authoritarianism, reflecting both the ideals of the revolution and the realities of power. Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, now turned from unification to preservation. He understood that Germany's sudden rise had alarmed its neighbors. France burned with resentment over its defeat and the loss of Alsace-Lorraine. Britain eyed Germany's industry with caution. Austria nursed its humiliation from Königgrätz. To keep the peace, Bismarck built a web of alliances and treaties, carefully balancing rivalries to isolate France and avoid encirclement. At home, Bismarck sought to strengthen the empire through pragmatic reforms. He launched the Kulturkampf, a struggle against the Catholic Church, fearing divided loyalties among Catholic Germans. Though this campaign largely failed, it revealed his determination to bring all elements of society under the authority of the new state. More enduring were his social reforms. To undercut the growing socialist movement, Bismarck introduced pioneering welfare programs, health insurance, accident insurance, and old age pensions. Ironically, the conservative chancellor became a founder of the modern welfare state. Meanwhile, Germany's economy boomed. Industrialization accelerated, fueled by coal, steel, and railways. Cities like Berlin, Essen, and Hamburg grew into centers of power. German science and technology advanced rapidly, producing new chemicals, machinery, and innovations. In less than 2 decades, Germany had become an industrial giant, rivaling Britain itself. Yet this power was fragile, tied to Bismarck's skill. He was a master of realpolitik, balancing internal divisions and external threats with cold calculation. His diplomacy maintained peace in Europe, even as nationalism simmered beneath the surface. For all his successes, however, he could not escape the passage of time. By 1888, Kaiser Wilhelm I was dead, and his successor, Wilhelm II, had little patience for Bismarck's cautious strategies. In 1890, the Iron Chancellor was dismissed, ending an era. Bismarck's legacy was paradoxical. He had united Germany and secured its place as a great power, but he had done so through war and authoritarian control. He built a strong state, yet left behind unresolved tensions between monarchy and parliament, militarism and liberalism, unity and diversity. His careful diplomacy held Europe together for 2 decades, but without him, the empire's ambitions would soon push the continent toward catastrophe. The unification of Germany in 1871 was one of the great turning points in modern history. In less than a decade, Otto von Bismarck and Prussia had transformed a fragmented patchwork of states into one of Europe's strongest nations. The German Empire stood as proof that determination, strategy, and force could forge unity out of centuries of division. Yet the legacy of unification was complex. On one hand, Germany's rise unleashed extraordinary progress. Its industries roared into life, its cities grew into cultural and scientific centers, and its people discovered a new sense of national pride. The dream that poets and students had whispered in the early 1800s was now a reality. Germany was no longer an idea, but a nation, a power that commanded respect across the continent. But the manner of its birth carried consequences. The empire had been forged not by democratic consensus, but by blood and iron. Its unity was crowned in the humiliation of France at Versailles, sowing bitterness that would not fade. Within, its politics balanced uneasily between authoritarian monarchy and popular parliament. National pride could inspire greatness, but it also carried the seeds of rivalry, militarism, and conflict. Bismarck had managed the tensions with skill, keeping the peace in Europe through diplomacy and restraint. Yet after his dismissal in 1890, the careful balance he had built began to fray. Germany's ambition would grow, its power would challenge its neighbors, and the road to the 20th century would be marked not only by triumphs, but by tragedy. Still, the achievement of unification cannot be denied. It reshaped the heart of Europe, altered the balance of power, and set the course of world history. The story of German unification is not simply one of wars and treaties. It is the story of identity, ambition, and the struggle to define a nation. As we reflect today, the lesson endures. Nations are not born only from dreams, but from choices. Choices of leaders and of peoples. Choices that can inspire unity or ignite division. In the 19th century, Germany chose unity, and in doing so, it entered history as both a promise and a warning. The birth of modern Germany was a triumph of vision and determination. But it was also a reminder that the way a nation is born can shape its destiny for generations to come.